everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to another edition of Moments with MindLeaps. Today I'm so excited to be introducing you to my guest, Max Lockie. My name is Rebecca and I'm the founder and executive director of MindLeaps, and I'm smiling because I see that Max is already joining. And I can't wait to get started with this conversation. We have the chance to speak with all sorts of interesting people around the world every week who are using the arts and technology and combining all of these interesting careers to really build these and their professional profiles. And Max is probably at the top of the list of cool people I know who are doing amazing things around the world. Hi,
Hey,
Max, how are you?
hey Rebecca, I'm doing great. So nice to see you today.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited that you agreed to do it because I keep telling most of the people I know, well, there's this really cool guy named Max and he's done all of these things. And I think people have heard me talk about you so much that they started to question whether or not you exist.
Sure. It's like in a movie where they make a composite character out of five different people, right? Yeah.
So
I
let
just
me
saw
please introduce Max, the composite character.
I just saw Dune last night, so I'm in movie land. Sorry. It was very good.
Well, we might ask you for other movie recommendations at the end, but if we start
Sure.
there, we'll never get to the exciting things about your history.
Cool.
For those of you who don't know, Max is well, probably a lot of people don't know. I'm going to break the news to most of the audience that Max has just joined the team of LinkedIn.
That's
I
right.
think a company that everybody around the world knows. I guess there's probably somebody we could find that doesn't know LinkedIn.
Well, if they don't know LinkedIn, they probably know Microsoft. And as of a couple of years ago, Microsoft owns LinkedIn, so it's just one big computer wrapping its arms around the world.
Oh, that's said in a very positive way, like a big hug.
Yeah,
Okay, well, we're going to ask you all about that, but let's start a little bit more near the beginning, Max.
sure.
From the time that I've known you, you've been involved in international development, technology, all sorts of interesting things. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up with such different interests. Did that come through your upbringing? Did that come through education,
Sure.
travel?
Yeah. Well, I'm born in New York to a father from England and a mother from Brooklyn. So,
Cool.
in some sense, I was kind of just right place, right time, right people. But when I was a kid, we moved to Atlanta, and to be honest, from an early age, when you're driving down the highway in Atlanta, you see signs for the Carter Center. If you're going places downtown, it can be part of the directions. It's a beautiful place. If you haven't been to Atlanta, if you haven't got the chance to go, it's a lovely campus. They have a Japanese garden and a pond with fish, and they have they're rehabilitating endangered trees there.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
presidential library
I
and
know
an
that.
NGO. Yeah, it's wonderful. So by the time I got to college and majored in political science with an international focus, the Carter Center was on my mind, and I went to informational sessions about getting interviews there. Then, right out of college, I went to Human Rights Watch as an intern,
Right.
and that was a great stepping stone to get me into the Carter Center. Again, as an intern, but then eventually as a program worker with Guinea as the first project that I worked on. The,
Kidding you. So
the
you started with the most fascinating project at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. This was 2010. I pretty much spent that whole year working on Guinea, from January when, oh gosh, so this was, for those who know Guinea, 2010, is a momentous year. For those who don't, there had been a military takeover by a colonel, I believe his rank was, by the name of Kamara. And then he had a botched assassination attempt. He was shot in the head, not killed though, but did flee the country. And it was just one of those situations where that sometimes that when something like that happens, it can go a lot of different directions. In the case of Guinea, it did lead towards multi-party democratic elections. So lemons, lemonade, I guess. And so I was working in the democracy program of the Carter Center. There are a lot of different programs. Budget-wise, the Carter Center is most focused on health. So eradicating guinea worm and other tropical diseases is a big part of what they do, but also observing elections. So around a few months later, the way the Carter Center works is we go first at a very small exploratory mission, a few people in the capital to get permission, to ask the government, get all of our papers in order, and start doing the initial work to figure out how to deploy people all over a country, especially one with limited infrastructure like Guinea. So the first time I ever stepped foot in Africa, I was a 22-year-old, pretty much still an intern with about $10,000 stuffed in my underwear to set up the entire mission. Yeah. So
that was not with MindLeaps. Let me just say that.
No, that was Carter Center, and that was Guinea style. But then I went back and forth throughout that year. The mission went well. And the election passed fairly peacefully. One thing about the way the Carter Center monitors elections is a lot of people still use the terminology free and fair. Was the election free and fair? Part of the Carter Center's work is moving away from that terminology of free and fair, instead of kind of applying that objective external framework on how a country conducts its democracy. What we do instead is, I still say we, I'm always going to say we, even though I haven't worked there since 2015. But what the Carter Center does is look at the agreements that that country has already made, which treaties it's signed on to, what its internal law says, and just measure the country as to whether it's meeting its own commitments, not ones imposed from the outside. So, did it meet its international standards? Did it meet its domestic standards? And all in all, the Guinea one went pretty well. I went on to observe more elections in Cote d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, and then Guyana in South America. But the Guinea one as being my first, and because Guinea's a special place, that's one that I'll always think of fondly. And because I met you there.
Well, that is certainly part of the connection. And I think, it's hard to explain Guinea to people who've not been to Guinea, because, you say like, once you go to Guinea, you'll never forget it. Like you can create a bond or a connection with the country and the people, and people kind of then like romanticize that, like, oh, like when I went to Rome, like I connected with Rome. Guinea's like not the same idea, right? It's not like a kind of this like, fantasy fairy tale. But it's fascinating in what it kind of shows about human behavior and what's possible and what's not possible to like build a democracy.
Right. And it's funny because I did my study abroad in Paris, and that's how I learned the French that let me be able to work in Guinea. It's French speaking. Cool. So I do have those. Oh my gosh, my time in Paris.
That's why
But my French it used to be Parisian, but then working in Africa, I think I lost all of my snooty affectations. But Guinea's different, especially from some of the other countries I mentioned, like Cote d'Ivoire and Congo, in large part because this is my opinion. I'm not a deep country expert. I perhaps was at the time, but they've never had a really all-out kind of civil war in Guinea. And in Cote d'Ivoire, very nearby, much richer country, leading cocoa producer in the world, big downtown with high rises, blah, 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 things that Guinea doesn't really have. But they did have a brutal civil war. And so while Guinea, lacks infrastructure and it lacks money, as a people able to make, democratic decisions and a level of social trust, it's something that doesn't exist everywhere.
It's so fascinating, and I promise our guests will move on from Guinea, but like Ansu, who's our country director, who for MindLeaps in Guinea, and who Max and I both met on this same mission that we're talking about, this democratic set of elections that happened in Guinea in 2010. Ansu, because I asked the same thing, is like, how is it possible that Guinea hasn't had a war, but every other country in this West African region has? And Ansu really thinks it's like the intermarriages among the different ethnic groups, which are so strong and polarizing in the country. But intermarriage is everywhere, in the capital, in the countryside. So a theory to be tested, perhaps, but interesting that like that's some of the thinking on the ground as to how the history rolls out differently than the neighbors.
Very good jazz music too. Let me just say the Bembeya National is kind of their national
Uh,
jazz group. It's worth a Spotify stream. It's very good.
well, thanks for giving me such a nice transition, Max, because one of the things is particularly fascinating about Max's career is not only does it have this international development theme that we've just talked about, but somehow you ended up at Rolling Stones, but now you have this slew of tech companies behind your name, including Facebook and LinkedIn. So
Right.
tell us a little bit about how we went from like poli-sci to the tech world.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a great question. I came to New York to do more political science graduate work,
Mm.
and ended up as a TV producer at MSNBC. And all I can say is that, when you're in New York and when you're in any big city, you meet a lot of people and just set aside time for networking. If you're spending 100% of your time studying or 100% of your time partying, then you're going to miss out on some things. So I definitely was reading all day, but, I would go to events and meet people and sign up for email lists. And I talked to the right people. And, MSNBC is a political news television show, quite different. It's obviously focused on US politics, the TV news channel. So a little different than what I've been studying, which is more international and theoretical. But it felt close enough to take the leap. So the leap. But then, so
I feel
yeah,
like
I
you're setting
spent.
me up for my transitions.
So yeah, I spent, and it's a little there. Like everybody's story, there's so many overlaps. While I was doing this, I also had a music blog that I wrote just on Tumblr, if anyone. And I wrote that on my own. Hardly anyone read it, but I was able to use it to get sometimes free concert tickets. I would ask one of the bigger, local music
Oh,
websites
cool.
if they needed someone to, go to a concert and write about it. And I'd show like, look, I have this blog, and then I would write for another blog that was bigger, and I'd get
Yeah.
the tickets. And eventually I was able to keep doing this. And one day I just went to rollingstone.com and clicked through their website till I found out who was in charge of internships and sent them an email and said, hey, I've been doing this on my own. Do you need any interns? And I didn't hear anything back for 2 or 3 months. I just thought this email went into nowhere land. And out of nowhere one day they said like, sure, let's set up an interview. And
Wow.
it turned into a 9-month internship at Rolling Stone, which I was doing while I was also working at MSNBC as a TV producer. So I was doing both. So I was working 7 days a week nonstop, which I know, Rebecca, I don't need to tell you about working too much. But that
But
was, I was in my mid 20s, I was in my early 20s still back then. So it's a good time to do 7 day a week work if you can.
I had never heard quite how you landed the Rolling Stones internship. So that's really cool, and it gives us all faith for in our outreach emails for whatever reasons, if it's fundraising, if it's job networking, if it's applications for fellowships or universities, that
Right.
sometimes it does work. So we'll take that glimmer of hope forward, Max. Thank
So
you.
and
um,
now if you want me to talk about the tech companies I worked at and all that.
yeah,
Yeah, okay, all right. So
we can't say the name Facebook and LinkedIn and then just like jump the topic.
yeah. So when I was at MSNBC, I was doing TV shows. But the funny thing about working on a TV show, like a news show especially, is let's say my show is on 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. At 4 p.m., your day's over. You have like the next team takes over, and everything after that is old news to you until you come back the next day. So I had some extra time. I had, more energy, so I started writing articles for the MSNBC.com website. And they already had a lot of people writing about politics, so I had to find something different to write about. And we're going back to like 2012, 2013 right now. And what was really popular around then were new apps for your iPhone. This was like the golden age of like funny apps coming out and cryptocurrency. So
Oh yeah.
I wrote a bunch of articles about Bitcoin back when it was
Seriously?
worth $300 for a Bitcoin. I was like, with the first time there was ever a congressional hearing about Bitcoin, I covered it. Rebecca, I have never bought Bitcoin.
No. I wanted to
Yeah,
ask you, so how much do you own? But I was like, I don't think I
no,
can ask you online, but
this
now that I know
much.
it's
Yeah,
Bitcoin,
no,
I can ask
I've
you.
since it was
No.
three
Not
hundred
even like
dollars.
Ethereum?
No, no, yeah, I have made no money off cryptocurrency, even though I've been like watching it and covering it for almost 10 years. Yeah, so
Well, so does
that's
that
it.
mean that you know something about it that the rest of the world doesn't know about it?
No, I mean, I think there's only one thing to know, which is that the numbers seem to go up, but I'm not giving investment advice, but it has been a wild thing to watch. So I ended up getting more interested in doing the kind of tech articles than the political TV shows. And so kind of had these two paths going.
Wow.
So then I went to, so it was time for me to change jobs because you should, if you like writing tech articles, a political TV show isn't really the place for you. So I went to Bloomberg News, which is a big financial and business media company, which has subscriptions for you can buy a Bloomberg computer that costs $2,000 a month is there, or you can, watch Bloomberg TV for free, but they do a really good job of covering business and media. So I went there as a digital editor for about a year. And then after 1 year there, through a professional network I was part of, I heard that Facebook was looking to hire more journalists and build out their news team to have more people kind of looking at Facebook and finding out how to, target news to people in a better way, and also to find news that was happening on Facebook and bring it to more people's news feeds. So that could be kind of your independent citizen blogger, and maybe they're using Facebook as their main blog to say what's happening in their area or community. Or it could be a small local publication that happens to be making like really cool 360 videos, and we think more people should see them. And so I spent about 2 years at Facebook. I was on a team called Editorial Services in the branch of Facebook called Media Partnerships. So um, on the one at one I was doing a bunch of things there. I was working with big media companies, a lot of ones with a business focus, like Wall Street Journal and Business Insider, to kind of be their guide on how they should use the latest Facebook features to with their audiences. And then also I was kind of going into the deep corners of Facebook, looking at different groups, small pages that were kind of focused on different, niches, and connecting those to the larger community who's interested in them. One of the example I always use is jazz. Like, if you go to Facebook and you just type in jazz, the results aren't really going to be that interesting. It's just going to be a lot of people who happen to have typed jazz. But if you go and you find, if it pulls up the local jazz clubs near you, some musicians, fan pages, maybe a publication or something like that. And so finding these, where the actual community of people who are interested in something, whether it's, tigers or Korean food or anything, and connecting that tighter with people by going out and actually finding those communities. So that was a big part of what I did there. Unfortunately, after the 2016 election, where Facebook was blamed for the outcome, so everything comes back to elections. You can't escape them. No matter you think
If it's
you're
Guinea or if it's the US, it changes your
yeah, you think you're researching Korean food for Facebook one day, and the next day, the company gets
somewhere else.
reorganized. Yeah. And so after that, I wound up at Reuters, the big international news company, and we were building an AI tool there that was, and it was still kind of a social media project because we were trying to find breaking news before anyone had reported it. So you take your, we would plug into all these social networks and run these sophisticated machine learning algorithms to find when when one person tweets something, it isn't news, or when one person makes an Instagram post. But if you use some software and find like, okay, maybe three people have all said this and they're all close to each other geographically, maybe that's worth picking up a phone and seeing what's happening. And
Cool.
when I first got there, the tool was very new, and it was very good at picking up death and destruction. So it was, a lot of
Oh
times it'd be
no.
like, yeah, it was
About
like
Guinea.
something's happening in Kashmir, something's happening in, with Boko Haram, or something like that. But we worked on it and kind of were able to use it for expand its use. So we found one time a few people tweeted about getting laid off in Kentucky. And so this tool found it, and then we had a reporter call, and Whirlpool, the appliance maker, they had just closed a plant, and 500 people had lost their jobs, but it hadn't been
Wow.
reported anywhere. And so we were
Wow.
able to use this tool to find news first. So it was really exciting. It used cutting edge technology. We had a group of delegates from the United Nations General Assembly come into Reuters offices, and I gave like a demonstration of the product that was really exciting. If you ever go to New York and you go to Times Square, you'll see Reuters. The address of their building is 2 Times Square, so it's a fun place to work as well. And
But
I,
the UN didn't steal you back after your great presentation.
It's funny. I just went to the movies a few weeks ago with my friend who's a translator at the UN,
Oh, cool.
and yeah, he's from Spain, and so I'm asking him like, is it empty? Is anybody going in? And he says people are starting to come back to work at the UN, but definitely not 100% yet. So I'm keeping my eye on the UN for one reason or another. But there, no, I mean it's great knowing people who work there, because it's just such a, I mean, it's cliche, but it's such a cool international network to be able to tap into. But so yeah, and now I'm just starting a new job at LinkedIn.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm going to be a news editor there. Pretty much all of my jobs since joining Bloomberg back in 2015, so for the last 6, 7 years, um, have been this kind of half, one foot in an editorial world, in a news world, and
Yeah.
then one foot in a technology world. And
Nice.
this is going to allow me to keep doing that with LinkedIn. So this is both, choosing which, articles are going to drive the conversation on LinkedIn every day, whether it's something's going wrong with a Boeing plane, or, there's a generational gap in the workplace. These the type of things that are important to know and also interesting to talk about, and
Well,
then finding, yeah,
I'm expecting to see a whole bunch of Guinea stories come up on LinkedIn now.
yeah, I'm gonna hack the algorithm for Guinea, no
Um,
problem.
Max, like, I mean, I said it in my intro, but I just like even listening to you again now. I mean, I just think it's so interesting to watch how your interests have changed over time, but
Mm,
yet you've still found a way to like either interweave them in the same career or move around within the space or jump spaces and like somehow always end up with these like cool opportunities where like the work that you do actually contributes to the space. Like what are some of the words of advice that you would give to youth who are coming up, who are like, I'm not just interested in one thing, or I'm so passionate about all these things but I need to make money. Like
yeah,
what was
yeah,
the secret behind like this path?
sure. So, young people are amazing. I don't think there's anything wrong with young people today. I used to be a young person and I had a great time. um, but well, I think what worked for me was, having those interests and having those passions. I guess for me it was music, um, and then making that kind of switch to being just like a consumer of it, of, listening to music, reading about music, listening about food, reading about food, reading about restaurants, or anything like that, to then making that switch from just kind of being the passive consumer of that information and content to trying becoming more of a producer of it, you know? So, you know, in my case, it was starting a blog. In another case, you know, if you really like, you know, if you're interested in exotic fruit, you know, maybe start an Instagram account where you post, you know, different fruit that you think is interesting. Just kind of thinking it can, and if starting, you know, if doing your own creative work or your own, you know, physical work seems like too big of a first step, then even just talking to people about it,
Yeah.
finding where people who share that interest congregate, and then joining that community and learning from them. But whatever that next step beyond just, you know, kind of passively consuming things, you know, I do it too. You know, every night I'm scrolling on Instagram. Like I get it, we're on Instagram right now. But just finding that next step from like, you know, passively scrolling, passively consuming to becoming more of that producer and, you know, having your own point of view, whatever that looks like for you, I would encourage you to find that, find the people doing that, and then go from there.
It's interesting, like the way that you frame it. I never kind of would have thought about that in my own journey, but you know, growing up, I was always in dance classes or dancing. But then at some point, I started like shifting, and I started choreographing and like creating the dance steps. And that's like,
Right.
you know, basically the fundamental shift that started my path versus kind of always being, yeah, on the consumer side.
Right.
And yeah,
And
you know, at the beginning, it wasn't very good, but it got better over time.
and even though I don't really have, you know, music isn't a big part of my professional life anymore, but it keeps popping up. You know, when I was at Facebook, I had one of the most fun projects I worked on was Facebook wanted to decide like which are the official musical genres, you know? And so it was, you know, so we were deciding like how specific are we going to get, you know? Should we say, you know, Mexican music, or should we say like salsa and bachata and like, you know, reggaeton and really get into it and all of that? And so I worked really closely with this guy, Andrew, who was also a former music journalist. And, you know, we were very rigorous. You know, we looked at what the Billboard defines genres are, what the Grammys define genres are, different Spotify playlists, and kind of came up with like a matrix so we could have, you know, I wouldn't say objective, but like a very informed, you know, decision-making process about it. And it took us like 3 months to
Wow.
come up with this. Andrew's now my boss at LinkedIn. So, you know, it's when you have like a genuine interest and you share that with other people, it's going to keep popping up, even if it's not, you know, the
Creates a
exact.
relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's like, you know, just like the way that we started this interview, Guinea and elections. I mean, it creates these bonds and these things that, you know, have now taken you from talking about Guinea to like teaching MindLeaps youth in North Macedonia, right?
Yeah, that was so
It's funny
cool.
how it all kind of like stacks up against another piece of it. Max, leave us just with one question or one thought, because I love listening to your brain talk out loud. You know, what's kind of one of the things that's on your mind about like the future of the world, right? I mean, in the last year, I've been asking every single person about COVID, but maybe it's not COVID. I mean, what's kind of that thing you're like, wow, I'm gonna watch for this in the like the future of the world or the future of the communities.
Sure. So yeah, this is where I'm going to go like full LinkedIn on you guys because you know, I think it's remote work for me. This kind of work from everywhere revolution. You know, I'm still throughout the pandemic, you know, I haven't moved. I'm still living in my apartment in Manhattan. But I've, you know, my work has gone online, even with this new job at LinkedIn. I'm, you know, going to go in the office a little bit, but it's still going to be a majority online. My brother left New York and bought a house in Vermont. He's now working online for a company in Alabama. You know, it's where people, you know, where people are going to move, where new housing needs to be built, what opportunities it's going to open up for international people, remote work, how it's going to change our immigration laws, how it's going to change the way people get paid, the you know the kind of tools that companies like Facebook and Google and Microsoft have been making that allows us to do all these things. And then now they're going to have their kind of fullest impact. And keeping an eye on that is, yeah, I think one of the most interesting things in the world.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the fact that we're here now and our friends around the world are listening to us talk about their countries, um, and some of their philosophies and some of the things that connect back home are fascinating and will continue to push us. Max, thank you so much for just like opening up your brain. These are the moments that I just live for on Moments with MindLeaps, because I get to listen, I get to learn, I get to go away and ask myself more questions. I so appreciate your time. I so appreciate
Yeah.
all you've done for MindLeaps this year, and we can't wait to find a chance to open up another conversation with you.
Yeah, no, definitely looking forward to, traveling and meeting people and all that as soon as it works out. So, yeah, have a great weekend. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to our fellow Americans. Thank you so much, Max. Talk to you really soon.
All right, bye.
Bye bye.